On a cold winter night, snowflakes gently covered the empty streets, blanketing the world in silence. Beneath the dim glow of a streetlight, a golden retriever dragged herself along the frozen ground, leaving streaks of blood across the pristine white snow. Her eyes, filled with pain, held a fierce determination, as if she was fighting to reach somewhere that mattered deeply. What had happened to this dog? Why was she enduring such agony? And could a miracle emerge on this freezing winter night? The grey sky over Portland hung heavy with an impending storm as a blue compact car pulled to a stop at the edge of a quiet neighborhood. Sophie, a golden retriever with a glossy golden coat, sat in the back seat, her tail wagging gently as she looked out the window. For 3 years, she had been the loyal companion of Clara, a woman who lived alone and found solace in Sophie's presence. But today was different. The air inside the car was tense, and Clara's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she stared blankly ahead. Clara had spent weeks agonizing over this moment. Financial struggles and a sudden move to a strict no-pets apartment had left her with few options. The thought of surrendering Sophie to a shelter had crossed her mind, but Clara couldn't bear the idea. The guilt of seeing Sophie's trusting eyes as she was handed over to strangers was too much to face. Instead, she convinced herself that leaving Sophie in a quiet neighborhood where someone might take her in was a kinder alternative. It wasn't rational, but Clara was desperate to avoid the confrontation with her own guilt. Clara turned to look at Sophie, who tilted her head, sensing her owner's unease. "I'm so sorry, girl," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. She reached back to stroke Sophie's head one last time. Sophie nuzzled her hand, wagging her tail with innocent enthusiasm, oblivious to the weight of the moment. Stepping out of the car, Clara opened the back door. "Come on, Sophie," she said, trying to sound cheerful. Sophie leapt out, her tail wagging furiously as she sniffed the unfamiliar surroundings. The street was quiet, lined with modest houses and overgrown gardens. Clara knelt down and buried her face in Sophie's fur, her tears soaking into the dog's golden coat. "Be a good girl," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Someone will take care of you." She couldn't bring herself to say goodbye. Without looking back, Clara climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. Sophie stood by the car, her head cocked in curiosity. She took a few steps forward, expecting Clara to call her back inside. Instead, the car began to move. Sophie trotted alongside it, wagging her tail, her nails clicking against the pavement. But when the car picked up speed, Sophie slowed to a stop, watching as the blue vehicle disappeared around a corner. Sophie sat on the sidewalk, her tail still for the first time that day. Her ears perked up at the sound of another car approaching, but it wasn't Clara's. She stood, uncertain, and began to wander down the street. Every so often, she glanced back, hoping to see her car returning. But the hours dragged on, and Sophie remained alone. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Streetlights flickered on, their yellow glow reflecting off Sophie's golden fur, now damp from the cold evening mist. A gentle wind carried the faint scent of Clara's perfume, lingering on Sophie's coat. She sniffed the air, desperate for any trace of her owner, but the smell was fading. As night fell, the street grew eerily quiet. Sophie lay down on the cold ground, her head resting on her paws, her eyes fixed on the direction Clara had gone. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she didn't move. She had always trusted Clara to feed her, to protect her. Now, alone in an unfamiliar place, Sophie didn't know where to go. The sounds of the neighborhood, distant barking, the rustling of leaves, the hum of a passing car, were unfamiliar and unsettling. A group of raccoons scurried past, making Sophie lift her head briefly before lowering it again. Her body trembled, both from the cold and the growing realization that Clara wasn't coming back. By midnight, Sophie could no longer ignore the ache in her stomach. She stood, her legs stiff from hours of stillness, and began to wander. The once quiet neighborhood felt ominous in the darkness. She sniffed at trash bins, but they were sealed tight, offering no food. A stray cat hissed and swiped at her when she got too close, forcing her to retreat. Sophie's paws ached as she walked aimlessly, the smooth pads of her feet unused to the rough pavement. As dawn began to break, Sophie found herself in an industrial part of town. Abandoned warehouses loomed on either side of the narrow street. The air smelled of oil and rust, mixed with the faint, unpleasant scent of garbage. Sophie's golden coat, once pristine, was now matted and dirty, and her tail hung low. She found a shallow puddle and drank deeply, grimacing at the metallic taste, but grateful for the moisture. Her stomach growled loudly, but there was no food in sight. By mid-morning, Sophie stumbled upon a small park. The grass was overgrown, and a broken bench sat beneath a gnarled tree. She curled up beneath it, seeking shelter from the cold wind. Her eyes drooped, heavy with exhaustion, but she stayed alert, her ears twitching at every sound. She didn't understand why Clara had left her. Sophie had always been good. She followed commands, stayed by Clara's side, and never caused trouble. What had she done wrong? The next few days passed in a blur. Sophie wandered through alleys and side streets, her once hopeful demeanor replaced by cautious resignation. She learned to avoid busy roads and sought out quieter areas where the threat of danger was minimal. Her golden coat was now streaked with mud, and her ribs began to show beneath her thinning fur. Despite her struggles, Sophie held on to a glimmer of hope. Every car that passed made her ears perk up, and every human figure in the distance made her tail wag momentarily. But the cars never stopped, and the people never called out to her. She was invisible in a city too busy to notice her. One night, as Sophie lay beneath the park bench, shivering from the cold, she let out a soft whimper. It wasn't a cry for help, but a sound of pure loneliness, a plea to a world that had turned its back on her. As the stars blinked faintly through the overcast sky, Sophie closed her eyes, holding on to the memory of Clara's touch and the warmth of a home that no longer existed. Her journey had only just begun. The days bled into each other as Sophie wandered the city, her golden coat dulled by dirt and grime. Hunger had become a constant gnawing ache in her stomach, while the chill of late autumn seeped into her bones. The bustling streets and alleys were foreign to her, a labyrinth of unfamiliar smells and sounds. Sophie's once trusting eyes now scanned her surroundings warily, her ears constantly alert for threats. By chance, Sophie stumbled upon the quieter outskirts of the industrial district. The sharp scent of rust and oil hung in the air, and the area was a patchwork of abandoned buildings and narrow alleys. Here, the chaos of the city seemed to quiet, though danger still lurked in the shadows. Sophie's steps were slow and deliberate, her body weakened by days without proper food. She scavenged what she could, a discarded sandwich crust here, a half-empty can of something sour there, but it was never enough. As the sky darkened, the wind picked up, carrying with it the promise of rain. Sophie's instincts urged her to find shelter before the storm arrived. Her nose led her to an old furniture warehouse near the river, its facade marked by years of neglect. The walls were streaked with rust, and broken windows stared out like hollow eyes. Near the back of the building, Sophie found a partially sealed loading dock, cluttered with fallen debris. It was tight, but it offered protection from the elements. Sophie sniffed the area carefully, ensuring it was unclaimed before crawling inside. The small space was far from ideal, but it felt like a refuge. The floor was dry, and the heavy debris surrounding the entrance created a natural barrier against intruders. Sophie curled up in a corner, her body trembling with exhaustion. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to close her eyes, the faint sound of the nearby river lulling her into an uneasy sleep. The storm broke in the early hours of the morning, rain pounding against the city with unrelenting force. Sophie woke to the sound of thunder, her body instinctively curling tighter into the corner of her makeshift shelter. But as the storm raged on, another sensation began to build within her, a deep, primal instinct she had never felt before. The first contraction hit her suddenly, and Sophie yelped softly, her body tensing. Instinct took over, guiding her as she prepared for what was to come. Hours passed, each contraction bringing with it a wave of pain and effort. The rain outside masked her soft whimpers, and the howling wind seemed to echo her struggles. By dawn, the storm began to ease, and Sophie lay exhausted but victorious. Nestled beside her were 6 tiny puppies, their damp fur slowly drying in the weak morning light that filtered through a crack in the wall. Each one was a miniature miracle, their tiny bodies warm against Sophie's side. She licked them gently, cleaning and comforting them as they squirmed and whimpered. For a brief moment, Sophie felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this harsh world still held some goodness after all. But the joy was short-lived. As the day wore on, 2 of the smallest puppies began to weaken. Sophie's maternal instincts kicked into overdrive. She nudged and licked them, trying desperately to stimulate their tiny bodies. She wrapped herself around them, offering all the warmth she could muster. Despite her efforts, their movements grew slower, their cries fainter. By sunset, the inevitable had happened. The 2 smallest puppies lay still, their tiny forms curled against Sophie's side. She nudged them gently, her brown eyes filled with a sorrow too deep to express. She whimpered softly, her grief a quiet echo of the storm that had passed just hours before. Sophie didn't leave them immediately. She licked them one last time, her maternal instincts refusing to accept what her heart already knew. Finally, as night fell once more, she nudged the 4 remaining puppies closer, shielding them with her body. Her loss only fueled her determination to protect the others. These 4 were her world now, and she would do whatever it took to keep them safe. The following days tested Sophie's resilience in ways she had never imagined. Her own hunger and exhaustion were constant battles, but she refused to leave her puppies unattended for long. Each time she ventured out to find food, her every instinct screamed at her to return quickly. The loading dock, with its narrow entrance and secluded location, offered a measure of safety, but it wasn't perfect. Sophie remained on high alert, her ears twitching at every sound outside. The puppies grew stronger with each passing day, their small cries more insistent and their movements more coordinated. Sophie named them in her own way, recognizing their personalities even in their early days. The largest of the litter was bold and adventurous, always pushing his siblings aside to nurse first. One of the girls was gentler, curling against Sophie's belly with a quiet, steady presence. Despite the challenges, Sophie found solace in her role as a mother. The tiny lives she had brought into the world gave her a sense of purpose, even as her own body weakened. She rationed every scrap of food she found, ensuring the puppies were fed before she allowed herself even a bite. As the first week passed, the puppies began to open their eyes, their small faces filled with wonder at the world around them. Sophie watched them closely, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and fear. She knew the dangers that awaited them outside the safety of the loading dock. The city was unforgiving, and Sophie had already learned its harsh lessons. The nights were the hardest. The cold seeped into the concrete floor, and Sophie often found herself shivering as she huddled around her puppies. The loss of the 2 smallest pups weighed heavily on her, a constant reminder of how fragile life could be. But she couldn't dwell on the past. She had 4 little ones depending on her, and she couldn't afford to fail them. Outside, the world continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the small family hidden in the shadows of the city. For Sophie, every moment was a fight for survival, but also a testament to her unwavering love for her puppies. The storm had tested her, but it had also forged her into something stronger, a mother willing to endure anything to protect her family. Little did Sophie know, her struggles were far from over. A new challenge loomed on the horizon, one that would push her to her limits and bring her face to face with the darkest corners of human cruelty, and the unexpected kindness that would change everything. The night was cold and silent, broken only by the distant hum of the city and the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. Sophie lay curled around her 4 remaining puppies in the dark shelter of the abandoned loading dock. The warmth of their tiny bodies pressed against her gave her a fragile sense of comfort, but her own strength was waning. Days of scant food and sleepless nights had taken their toll, and Sophie knew that if she didn't eat soon, she wouldn't have enough energy to produce milk for her puppies. As the first drops of rain began to fall, Sophie reluctantly stood. She nudged her sleeping pups closer together, wrapping them in the tattered remnants of a blanket she had scavenged days earlier. With a low whimper, she stepped out of the shelter, her instincts warring with her maternal fear. She hated leaving them even for a moment, but necessity outweighed her anxiety. Sophie trotted cautiously through the darkened streets, her nose to the ground, as she searched for any trace of food. The rain intensified, soaking her matted fur and making the pavement slick beneath her paws. The industrial district was eerily quiet, the usual daytime clamour replaced by the hollow echoes of the storm. Sophie avoided the alleys she knew were frequented by stray dogs and feral cats, unwilling to risk a confrontation. After nearly an hour of fruitless searching, a faint smell caught her attention. Sophie lifted her head, her nose twitching as she traced the scent to its source, a dumpster behind an old, run-down bar. The smell of grease and spoiled food wasn't appetizing, but it was the closest thing to sustenance Sophie had found in days. Her stomach growled loudly, and she quickened her pace. The dumpster was old and rusted, its lid partially ajar. Sophie rose onto her hind legs, balancing precariously as she nosed the lid open further. Inside, she spotted the source of the smell, a half-eaten sandwich and a few scraps of meat. She reached for the food, her mouth watering in anticipation. "Hey! Get away from there, you filthy mutt!" The angry voice cut through the rain like a knife. Sophie froze, her ears flattening against her head. She turned to see a man stumbling out of the bar, his unsteady gait and slurred words betraying his drunkenness. His face was twisted in anger as he waved a bottle in one hand and gestured wildly with the other. Sophie backed away, her body low to the ground, but the man's rage was unrelenting. "You think you can just come here and take whatever you want?" he shouted, his words punctuated by a hiccup. "Get out of here!" Sophie turned to run, her paws slipping on the wet pavement, but the man wasn't finished. In his drunken fury, he grabbed a loose brick from the ground and hurled it at her. The brick struck Sophie's hind leg with a sickening thud, and she yelped in pain, collapsing onto the ground. Her vision blurred as a wave of agony shot through her body, her injured leg refusing to bear weight. The man sneered, taking another swig from his bottle. "That'll teach you," he muttered, before stumbling back inside the bar and slamming the door shut behind him. Sophie lay on the ground, rain pelting her fur as she panted heavily. The pain was overwhelming, but the thought of her puppies waiting for her gave her the strength to move. Slowly, she dragged herself forward, using her front legs to pull her body across the slick pavement. Her injured leg trailed uselessly behind her, leaving a faint smear of blood in her wake. The journey back to the loading dock, which normally took minutes, stretched into an eternity. Sophie's body screamed for rest, but she couldn't stop. Each inch she covered felt like a victory, a testament to her determination and love for her puppies. The rain blurred her vision, and the cold seeped into her bones, but Sophie pressed on, her soft whimpers echoing through the empty streets. By the time Sophie reached the shelter, her body was trembling with exhaustion. She collapsed at the entrance, her breathing shallow and laboured. Inside, her puppies stirred, their small cries piercing the darkness. Summoning the last reserves of her strength, Sophie crawled into the narrow space, pulling herself close to her pups. Their warmth against her battered body was both a comfort and a reminder of her duty. Sophie licked each puppy gently, her pain momentarily forgotten as she reassured them with her presence. Her injured leg throbbed, but she didn't care. She had made it back to them, and that was all that mattered. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away the bloodstains on the pavement, but the memory of the night's events lingered. Sophie's world had become a cycle of survival, each day a battle against the elements, hunger, and the cruelty of a world that seemed to have no place for her and her puppies. Despite the hardships, Sophie's resolve only grew stronger. She would endure whatever came her way, not for herself, but for the tiny lives that depended on her. The city might be unkind, but Sophie's love for her pups was a force no storm, no hunger, and no cruelty could extinguish. What Sophie didn't know was that fate was about to intervene. Her struggles had not gone unnoticed, and help was closer than she could have imagined. The rain had turned the city into a maze of slick streets and reflective puddles as Emma drove carefully through the industrial district. She had stayed late at the veterinary clinic that evening, her hands still aching from a long day of surgeries and checkups. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic swipe of the windshield wipers filled the car as she navigated the quiet roads. She should have taken the faster route home, but an inexplicable pull guided her down an unfamiliar street. As Emma rounded a corner, the faint glow of her headlights caught a glimmer of movement on the pavement. She slowed the car, her eyes narrowing in curiosity. At first, she thought it was debris swept by the wind, but then she heard it, a faint, desperate whimper cutting through the sound of the rain. Her heart quickened as she pulled over to the curb, grabbing the emergency kit she always kept in the car. Stepping out into the cold drizzle, Emma followed the sound, her boots splashing through shallow puddles. The rain blurred her vision, but the soft cries grew louder, guiding her steps. Then she saw her, a golden retriever, her golden coat, matted with mud and streaked with rain, was dragging herself across the wet pavement. One of her hind legs hung limp, trailing behind her as she struggled forward. A faint smear of blood marked her path. Emma froze for a moment, her breath catching at the sight. The dog's eyes, wide with pain and exhaustion, locked onto hers. "Oh, sweetheart," Emma whispered, lowering herself to a crouch a few feet away. Her voice softened instinctively, the same tone she used with the frightened animals she cared for. "It's okay. I'm here to help." The dog whimpered again, her ears twitching as though she understood. But instead of staying still, she continued to drag herself forward, every movement labored and excruciating. Emma noticed the faint flicker of determination in the dog's eyes. She wasn't moving aimlessly, she had a purpose. "You're trying to show me something," Emma murmured, following the dog as she painfully made her way down the rain-slicked road. The journey was slow and agonizing to watch. Emma stayed close, shielding the dog as best she could from the cold rain. The dog's body trembled with each movement, her strength visibly waning. Eventually she stopped in front of an old warehouse, its exterior dark and foreboding under the stormy sky. With a weak nudge of her nose, the dog motioned toward a narrow opening near the base of the building. Emma crouched low, shining her flashlight into the gap. What she saw inside made her breath hitch. 4 tiny puppies lay huddled together on a scrap of torn fabric, their small bodies shivering from the cold. Their cries were faint, barely audible over the rain. The mother dog let out a soft whimper, her gaze fixed on her puppies as if reassuring them that she had returned. Emma's heart ached at the sight. "Oh my God," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. She carefully reached into the space, her hands moving with practiced gentleness. One by one, she lifted the puppies, wrapping each of them in clean towels from her kit. Their small bodies were cold but alive, their soft cries a testament to their will to survive. The mother dog watched intently, her eyes following every movement Emma made. Despite her pain, her focus never wavered from her puppies. "You've done so much for them," Emma said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Now it's my turn to help." As Emma wrapped the last puppy, her fingers brushed against something around the dog's neck. She looked closer and saw a worn leather collar, its metal tag tarnished but still intact. Tilting the flashlight, she read the faint engraving. Sophie. "Sophie," Emma whispered, the name catching in her throat. The coincidence struck her deeply, as though fate had guided her here. "That's your name?" The dog whimpered softly, her tired eyes meeting Emma's as if to confirm. Emma blinked back a sudden wave of emotion. Emma worked quickly to prepare Sophie and her puppies for the journey. She lined a sturdy box with towels, placing the puppies inside carefully to keep them warm. For Sophie, she fashioned a makeshift stretcher from her raincoat and a piece of plywood she found nearby. With slow, deliberate movements, she eased the injured dog onto it. Sophie whimpered in pain but didn't resist, her gaze flicking back to the box of her puppies, as if drawing strength from their presence. Once everyone was secured in her car, Emma climbed into the driver's seat and turned on the heater. The rain had intensified, hammering against the windshield as she drove through the darkened streets. Her hands gripped the wheel tightly, her mind racing with urgency. Every few moments she glanced into the rearview mirror, where Sophie lay motionless but alert, her eyes fixed on her puppies nestled beside her. Emma's heart swelled with a mix of determination and sorrow. This dog had endured so much, yet she had never given up. "You're incredible," Emma murmured, glancing at Sophie through the mirror. "We'll get you the help you need." The drive felt longer than it was, the rain and wind battering the car as Emma navigated the quiet roads. When she finally pulled up to the clinic, she exhaled deeply. She wasted no time, carefully carrying the box of puppies inside first, their small cries growing louder in the warmth of the building. Then she returned for Sophie, enlisting the help of a colleague to lift the stretcher and bring the injured dog inside. Under the soft lights of the clinic, Emma looked at Sophie and her tiny family. The mother dog lay exhausted but calm, her eyes never leaving her puppies, even as the veterinary team began their assessments. Emma placed a gentle hand on Sophie's head, brushing her fingers over the worn leather collar that bore her name. "You're safe now," she said quietly. "We'll take care of all of you." Emma knew this was only the beginning, but for now, Sophie and her puppies were out of the storm. That was enough. The sterile lights of the veterinary clinic illuminated Sophie's frail form as Emma and the team worked to assess her condition. X-rays revealed a clean but severe break in her hind leg, likely from the impact of the brick. The scans also showed older injuries, evidence of the harsh life she had endured. Combined with severe malnutrition and several infected cuts, Sophie's prognosis was grim. Yet her steady gaze and quiet determination gave Emma hope. The puppies, though weak and dehydrated, were remarkably resilient. After feeding and a thorough checkup, they nestled together in a warm box lined with blankets, their tiny breaths steadying under the clinic's care. Sophie, despite her own pain, remained alert, her eyes tracking every movement of her puppies. Even sedated for surgery, her instinct to protect them never faltered. The surgery to repair Sophie's leg lasted several hours. A metal plate and screws were inserted to stabilize the bone, and her wounds were carefully cleaned and stitched. When Sophie was finally wheeled into recovery, Emma sat by her side, her hand resting gently on the dog's head. "You fought so hard," Emma whispered. "Now it's time to rest. We'll take care of you." Emma decided to bring Sophie and her puppies home for their recovery. Though it was unconventional, she felt a deep, unshakable connection to the dog. As she carefully loaded Sophie and the pups into her car, she glanced at the worn collar bearing the name Sophie. The name wasn't just a coincidence, it felt like a sign. At home, Emma's husband, Michael, greeted her at the door with a mix of curiosity and concern. The sight of Sophie, bandaged and exhausted, tugged at his heart. He gently lifted the box of puppies from Emma's arms, his expression softening as the tiny pups wriggled in their blankets. "She looks like she's been through hell," Michael said, his voice low as he helped Emma settle Sophie onto a soft bed they had prepared in the corner of their living room. "She has," Emma replied, brushing a hand over Sophie's head. "Her name is Sophie. At least, that's what her collar says." Michael paused, understanding the significance immediately. He placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "She's lucky you found her." "No," Emma said softly, her eyes misting. "I think I was meant to." The days that followed were grueling but rewarding. Sophie required constant care, her leg immobilized in a bright blue cast and her body still weak from malnutrition. Emma took time off work to ensure Sophie had everything she needed, from specialized meals to regular pain management. Michael stepped in to help with the puppies, feeding them every few hours and ensuring their bedding was clean and warm. Though initially wary, Sophie began to relax under their care. Her eyes softened, and her tail gave the faintest wag whenever Emma approached. The puppies, now named Max, Charlie, Luna, and Star, thrived under the loving attention of their human caretakers. Each developed their own personality. Max, the largest and boldest; Charlie, the chatterbox who often squeaked and whimpered; Luna, the adventurous explorer; and Star, the quiet and nurturing one. For Emma, caring for Sophie and her pups became more than just an act of compassion. It was a form of healing. The quiet moments spent feeding the puppies or gently massaging Sophie's injured leg allowed her to confront the grief she had long buried. She found herself talking to Sophie as she worked, sharing the story of her daughter's short life. "I lost my Sophie when she was just a baby," Emma confided one night as she sat beside the dog. "She was my world, and for a long time I didn't think I could bear the pain. But you're teaching me that healing is possible." Sophie, as if understanding, shifted closer and rested her head in Emma's lap. The simple gesture brought tears to Emma's eyes. In Sophie's quiet resilience, she saw a reflection of her own struggles, a reminder that love could endure even in the face of profound loss. As weeks turned into months, Sophie's strength began to return. Her once dull coat regained its golden sheen, and her eyes sparkled with life. Though she still limped slightly, she began to explore the house more confidently, her tail wagging more often. The puppies grew rapidly, filling the Martinez home with the joyful chaos of tiny paws and playful yips. Michael, initially hesitant about the responsibility of caring for so many animals, found himself deeply attached to the family of dogs. He often joked that Max thought he was the alpha, following him around the house and barking whenever he stopped to rest. The bond between Sophie and Emma deepened as well. Emma found herself smiling more, her heart lighter with each passing day. She began to talk about her daughter more openly with Michael, sharing memories and allowing herself to feel joy in remembering Sophie, rather than just pain. One evening, as the family sat together in the living room, Michael looked at Sophie, now lying peacefully with her puppies curled against her. "She's not just healing," he said. "She's helping us heal too." Emma nodded, her hand resting on Sophie's head. "I think she was sent to us," she said softly. "She's a reminder that even in the hardest moments, we can find a way forward." The Martinez home, once quiet and marked by an unspoken sadness, was now filled with life and love. Sophie's journey of recovery had become a journey of healing for them all. Through Sophie's unwavering determination and the simple joy of her puppies, Emma and Michael found a renewed sense of hope, a testament to the power of love, even in its most unexpected forms. The sun streamed through the kitchen window as Emma poured herself a cup of coffee, her gaze drifting to the living room where Sophie lay on a large dog bed, surrounded by her 4 rambunctious puppies. The morning was alive with the sounds of tiny paws skittering across the floor and the playful yips of the puppies as they wrestled with one another. Sophie, ever the watchful mother, lifted her head to monitor their antics, her eyes soft with affection. Emma leaned against the counter, smiling. It had been months since she first found Sophie in the rain-soaked streets, battered but determined to protect her pups. Now the house felt transformed, no longer a place marked by quiet grief, but one filled with the joyful chaos of new life. Emma and Michael had spent weeks discussing the future of Sophie and her puppies. Initially, the plan had been to find loving homes for the puppies once they were old enough, but as time passed, the thought of parting with them grew increasingly difficult. Each puppy had become an integral part of their daily lives, their distinct personalities carving out a place in the Martinez family. Max, the bold and fearless leader, had taken a liking to Michael, often following him around the house like a shadow. Charlie, the vocal one, loved to talk to anyone who would listen, his playful barks and whines filling the house with laughter. Luna, ever the adventurer, was always the first to explore new corners of the house, her curiosity boundless. And Star, the quiet and nurturing pup, often curled up beside Sophie, a gentle reminder of her mother's steady presence. Michael was the first to voice what they had both been feeling. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching the puppies tumble over each other in the yard, he turned to Emma. "Maybe we're not meant to let them go," he said quietly. Emma looked at him, her heart swelling. "You mean, keep them all?" Michael nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Look at them. They're already part of the family, and honestly, I can't imagine this house without them." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she reached for his hand. "Neither can I." With the decision made, the Martinez home truly became a sanctuary for Sophie and her pups. Michael fenced in the backyard, giving the dogs a safe space to play and explore. Emma took the lead in training the puppies, her veterinary expertise coming in handy as she taught them basic commands and manners. The once quiet house was now filled with the sounds of playful barks, the occasional crash of a knocked-over vase, and endless laughter. Sophie, now fully healed except for a slight limp, thrived in her new role as both a mother and a companion. She moved with a quiet grace, her golden coat gleaming in the sunlight as she supervised her pups. But Sophie's influence extended beyond her little family. She became a source of healing for Emma and Michael as well. Emma found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. Inspired by Sophie's story, she began sharing it with friends, neighbors, and even the local community. At first, it was just a simple recounting of the night she found Sophie and her puppies. But as the story spread, it became a message of hope and resilience. Emma started volunteering at a local animal rescue, sharing Sophie's story as a way to encourage people to adopt and care for animals in need. She spoke at community events, using Sophie as an example of the transformative power of compassion. Each time she shared the story, Emma felt a little piece of her heart heal. One morning, Emma sat at her desk, staring at the worn leather collar Sophie had been wearing the night they met. She ran her fingers over the engraved name, remembering the overwhelming connection she had felt in that moment. "Sophie," she whispered, "you've brought us so much more than we could ever give you." From that day forward, Emma and Michael dedicated themselves to spreading the love Sophie had brought into their lives. They created a small community fund in Sophie's name, raising money to help cover medical costs for injured and abandoned animals. The initiative, called Sophie's Hope, quickly gained traction, with people inspired by the Martinez family's story contributing generously. The Martinez home became a beacon of love and second chances. Sophie was no longer just a survivor. She was a symbol of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of connection. Her puppies, now growing rapidly, reflected her strength and joy, each one a testament to the bond that had brought them all together. As the seasons changed, so did the Martinez family. Emma and Michael found themselves smiling more, their once muted lives now vibrant and full of purpose. Sophie had not only helped heal their hearts, but also reminded them of the beauty that could come from even the darkest moments. Their home, once marked by loss, was now filled with life and laughter. Sophie and her pups were no longer just guests. They were family. Together, they had created a new kind of sanctuary, one built on love, trust, and the unbreakable bonds that connected them all. And for the first time in a long while, Emma felt truly whole. Chapter 7. A Miracle from God. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the Martinez home, casting a warm glow over the busy household. Sophie lay on her favorite spot by the couch, her golden coat gleaming as she watched her now-grown puppies play in the yard. Max was attempting to climb over Luna, who was busily chewing on a toy, while Star and Charlie rolled in the grass, barking joyfully. Emma sat nearby, a cup of tea in hand, her heart full as she watched the life Sophie had brought into their home flourish. It had been nearly a year since Emma found Sophie in the rain-soaked streets, and their lives had changed in ways she could never have imagined. Sophie, once a battered stray fighting to protect her pups, was now a cherished member of the family and a symbol of hope. But Sophie's journey wasn't the only miracle to bless their home. One crisp autumn morning, Emma felt unusually tired. The fatigue was unlike her usual exhaustion from the joyful chaos of caring for Sophie, her pups, and her work at the animal rescue. She dismissed it as stress, but as the days passed, other subtle changes made her pause. On a whim, Emma decided to take a pregnancy test, her heart pounding as she waited for the result. When the positive symbol appeared, she gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you, God." After years of longing and heartbreak, Emma and Michael were finally going to have another child. The news brought a wave of joy to the Martinez household. Michael was ecstatic, holding Emma close as they both wept with happiness. "It's a miracle," he whispered. "We've waited so long for this." For Emma, the timing felt like no coincidence. She saw Sophie's arrival in their lives as a gift, one that had brought healing and purpose when they needed it most. Now, this new life growing within her felt like a continuation of that blessing, a testament to the love and compassion they had poured into Sophie and her pups. As Emma's pregnancy progressed, Sophie's role in the family took on a new dimension. The dog seemed to sense the significance of the growing life within Emma. Sophie often rested her head gently on Emma's lap, her warm brown eyes filled with a quiet understanding. She followed Emma closely, her protective instincts as strong as ever, and even the puppies seemed to recognize the change. Max became Emma's shadow, while Star and Charlie often nestled at her feet, and Luna was never far behind. The house, once marked by quiet grief, now brimmed with anticipation. Michael built a new nursery, repainting the walls a soft yellow, and Sophie often watched from the doorway, her tail wagging faintly as Emma and Michael prepared for the baby's arrival. When Sophia Grace Martinez was born on a snowy December evening, it felt as though the world stood still. The tiny baby, named after Emma's first daughter and a reflection of God's grace, was a miracle in every way. Michael held her with trembling hands, his heart full of awe, while Emma, exhausted but glowing, wept tears of joy. Returning home from the hospital, Sophie was the first to greet them, her tail wagging furiously as she sniffed at the bundle in Emma's arms. Carefully, Emma lowered herself to Sophie's level, allowing the dog to meet the newest member of their family. Sophie nuzzled the baby gently, her eyes soft with curiosity and love. "She knows," Emma whispered to Michael. "She knows how special Sophia is." As the days turned into weeks, Sophie became an ever-present guardian for baby Sophia. She would rest beside the crib, her ears perking up at the slightest sound, and often accompanied Emma during late-night feedings. The puppies, though playful and lively, seemed to understand the delicate nature of their new sibling. They would sit quietly near the baby, their inquisitive noses sniffing the air, as if trying to understand this new addition to their pack. Sophia grew up surrounded by love, not only from her parents, but from her four-legged family. As she learned to crawl, Sophie was always nearby, her gentle presence ensuring the baby never strayed too far. When Sophia took her first wobbly steps, it was Max's broad back she clung to, while Charlie barked encouragement. For Emma, these moments were nothing short of divine. She often found herself marveling at the interconnectedness of it all, how Sophie's arrival had set into motion a series of events that brought healing, hope, and now new life into their family. Inspired by Sophie's incredible journey, Emma and Michael decided to create a foundation to support animals in need. They named it the Sophie Fund, dedicated to covering medical expenses for injured and abandoned animals, giving them a chance to find loving homes, just as Sophie had. The community rallied behind the cause, moved by Sophie's story of survival and transformation. Emma often shared the tale at fundraisers and community events, her voice steady but full of emotion. Sophie taught us that love and compassion can heal even the deepest wounds, she would say. Her story is proof that even the most broken can become whole again. Years passed, but Sophie's impact on the Martinez family and their community only grew. She remained a constant in Sophia's life, her golden coat now tinged with grey but her spirit as strong as ever. Sophia adored Sophie, often curling up beside her with a book or resting her head against the dog's soft fur after a long day of school. The Martinez home became a sanctuary for second chances, a place where love and healing thrived. Sophie, once a battered stray, had become the heart of their family, her journey a reminder of the extraordinary power of compassion. And every time Emma looked at Sophia, she felt an unshakable certainty. Their family, though built from unexpected pieces, was a testament to God's grace. Together they had created a home filled with love, laughter, and the undeniable truth that miracles, no matter how small, are always worth believing in. Sophie's journey reminds us that no matter how broken or abandoned we may feel, love has the power to heal and transform. Through the Martinez family's kindness and God's unwavering grace, Sophie found a new beginning, and their lives were forever changed. It's a beautiful reflection of God's infinite love for all his creations, a love that mends what is broken and gives us strength to carry on. Let Sophie's story inspire us to open our hearts, to see the beauty in second chances, and to trust in God's plan, even when the path is difficult. His love is always at work, leading us to the miracles we often least expect. As you reflect on this story, we invite you to comment below. What moments in your life remind you of God's grace? Have you experienced or witnessed the power of compassion and second chances? Share your story with us. We'd love to hear how faith and love have shaped your journey. And if Sophie's story touched your heart, share it with others. By spreading this message, you help inspire hope, kindness, and a deeper trust in God's love. Let's work together to bring light into the lives of those who need it most. Under the cold autumn sky, a faint cry echoed from beneath the Riverbend Bridge. There, a wounded German shepherd lay, her fragile body shielding a litter of tiny, helpless puppies. What drove her to endure such pain, and how far could her love for her little ones carry her? The answer lies in a tale of quiet bravery and unwavering devotion. The quiet hum of David Miller's patrol car filled the stillness of a chilly autumn night in Maple Valley. The small town's streets, lit by the occasional flicker of streetlights, were deserted. Golden leaves, remnants of a long-forgotten summer, swirled across the asphalt in the crisp October breeze. David's route took him past Riverbend Bridge, a worn, weathered structure whose iron beams groaned faintly in the wind. The dashboard clock blinked 11:47 p.m. as he turned onto the narrow road leading to the bridge.
David's thoughts drifted as he drove. His fingers tapped absent-mindedly on the steering wheel, keeping rhythm with the soft country tune playing on the radio. It had been 3 months since he lost Shadow, his canine partner of 7 years. The absence of Shadow's steady breathing in the passenger seat was a void that no amount of routine could fill. The dog had been more than just a partner. He had been a friend, a protector, and a reminder that even in solitude, David wasn't truly alone. Tonight, however, something tugged at his focus. As he approached the bridge, the faint sound of a cry pierced the tranquility. David slowed the car, leaning forward to peer through the windshield. The sound came again, faint but unmistakable, a whimper. He pulled over, killed the engine, and stepped out into the cool night air. The wind carried the faint cries, tugging at his senses and urging him toward the bridge. David reached for his flashlight and radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Miller. Possible distressed animal situation at Riverbend Bridge. Stand by for updates." He spoke into the receiver before clipping it to his belt. Crunching leaves underfoot, David made his way toward the bridge's foundation. The cries grew louder as he descended the slope. His flashlight beam cut through the shadows, revealing the cracked concrete and overgrown weeds that marked the underside of the bridge. At first he saw nothing but the cold steel beams and the graffiti-covered walls. Then the beam caught a glint of eyes, wide, frightened, and glowing in the dark. David froze. "It's okay," he called out softly, lowering the beam slightly to avoid startling the creature. "I'm here to help." From the shadows emerged a figure that made his breath hitch, a large German shepherd, her fur matted and stained with dirt and what appeared to be dried blood. Her body curled protectively around a small wriggling mass, Puppies. She let out a low growl, her eyes locking onto David's, a mixture of warning and desperation. David crouched slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the remains of a granola bar he had saved from earlier in his shift. He unwrapped it carefully, the crinkle of the wrapper catching the dog's attention. Her ears perked up slightly, but she didn't move away from her position. "Good girl," David murmured, inching closer. The dog didn't growl this time, though her body remained tense, a coiled spring ready to defend her young. David extended the bar toward her, placing it gently on the ground and retreating a few steps. After a moment's hesitation, the dog sniffed at the food, her caution giving way to hunger. She devoured it quickly, glancing back at David with wary eyes. The closer David got, the more he realized the extent of her injuries. Deep scratches lined her flank, and her breathing was labored, each rise and fall of her chest a visible struggle. Yet despite her obvious pain, she never shifted her position away from her puppies. They huddled close to her belly, their tiny bodies trembling in the chilly night air. The sight struck a chord deep within David. Memories of Shadow flooded his mind, how the dog had refused to leave his side, even during his final days battling cancer. Shadow had endured pain with quiet dignity, determined to fulfill his role as protector until the very end. And here, under the Riverbend Bridge, was another soul exhibiting the same unyielding loyalty. "Dispatch, this is Officer Miller." He spoke again into his radio, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "I need animal control and an emergency vet at Riverbend Bridge ASAP. Injured dog with a litter of puppies. Situation is critical." "Copy that, Officer Miller. Help is on the way," the dispatcher responded. David returned his attention to the dog. "We'll get you help," he promised softly. "Just hang in there." Minutes felt like hours as he stayed with the dog, speaking in soothing tones to calm her. She seemed to respond to his presence, her growls fading into quiet whines. One of the puppies, braver than the rest, crawled toward David's outstretched hand. Its tiny nose twitched as it sniffed him, letting out a soft squeak. David chuckled despite himself, his heart aching at the sight of such fragile lives fighting to survive. Soon the sound of approaching vehicles broke the stillness. Flashlights bobbed in the darkness as the rescue team arrived, their voices hushed but efficient. A veterinarian, a woman in her 40s with a calm demeanor, introduced herself as Dr. Harper. She quickly assessed the situation, her face growing serious as she examined the mother dog. "She's in bad shape," Dr. Harper said, her hands working gently to secure the dog onto a stretcher. "We'll need to stabilize her immediately. Those wounds look infected, and she's severely dehydrated." The puppies were carefully placed into a warm carrier, their tiny cries filling the night air. The mother dog, though clearly exhausted, kept her eyes fixed on her puppies as she was lifted onto the stretcher. David stayed close, his presence seeming to provide her some measure of reassurance. "She's brave," Dr. Harper noted as they loaded the stretcher into the waiting van. "Most dogs in her condition would have given up, but she's held on for them." David nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "She reminds me of someone I used to know," he said quietly, thinking of Shadow. As the van pulled away, David stood alone under the bridge for a moment, staring at the empty space where the small family had been. The faint scent of the granola bar lingered in the air. He took a deep breath, the cold filling his lungs and grounding him. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since Shadow's passing: hope.
With a determined stride, David returned to his patrol car. As he drove toward the Maple Valley Animal Hospital to check on the dog and her puppies, a thought crossed his mind. Sometimes, saving others has a way of saving ourselves.
The fluorescent lights of Maple Valley Animal Hospital cast a stark contrast to the shadowy stillness of the autumn night outside. As the rescue team carefully carried Bella and her tiny puppies into the building, the air buzzed with urgency. David Miller followed closely, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets to hide the nervous clenching of his fists. His eyes darted to Bella, her body barely rising and falling with shallow breaths, and to the fragile forms of her puppies nestled in a warm carrier. Dr. Harper was already in motion, issuing instructions to her team. "Get her on the table. We need fluids started immediately. Check for infection. And warm blankets. Lots of them." The team worked efficiently, transferring Bella onto a padded table in the treatment room. David lingered near the doorway, unsure if he should step back or stay. Dr. Harper noticed his hesitation and gave him a reassuring nod. "You can stay, Officer Miller. Your presence might help keep her calm." David stepped closer, his eyes scanning Bella's fragile frame. Her fur had been matted and dirty under the bridge, but under the hospital's lights, the true extent of her injuries was laid bare. Deep scratches and puncture wounds marred her flank, some oozing faintly. Her breathing was labored, her body limp but for the occasional flicker of her ears as the puppies cried softly from their carrier. "She's severely dehydrated," Dr. Harper said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "These wounds are older than I thought, probably several days. She's been holding on for her puppies, but the infection is spreading fast." David swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Can she make it?" Dr. Harper paused, meeting his gaze. "We're going to do everything we can, but it's going to be a tough fight." The team moved around Bella with practiced precision. A catheter was inserted to administer fluids, and antibiotics were prepared to combat the infection. Dr. Harper leaned over Bella, her gloved hands gentle yet firm as she cleaned the wounds, shaving away matted fur to prevent further contamination. Bella winced slightly but didn't resist, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment before closing again. David stepped closer, his voice soft but steady. "You're safe now, Bella. Just hold on."
One of the vet techs, a young woman named Claire, brought the puppies over to a separate incubator. "They're small but stable for now," she said, adjusting the temperature settings. David watched as the tiny bodies wriggled and stretched, their soft squeaks filling the room. His heart ached at the thought of what they had endured.
"How are they?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "They'll need round-the-clock care," Claire replied, her tone serious but hopeful. "Feeding, warmth, and monitoring, but they've got a fighting chance." Dr. Harper glanced up from her work on Bella. "And so does she added, as if sensing David's unspoken fears. "But we'll need to monitor her closely. The next 24 hours are critical." David nodded, his resolve hardening. "I'm not going anywhere." Hours passed in a blur of activity. David stayed by Bella's side, occasionally glancing at the puppies in their incubator. He thought about Shadow and how the dog had endured so much in his final days, never once letting his pain overshadow his loyalty. Bella reminded him of that same quiet strength. Her body was failing, but her spirit seemed unbroken, driven by a love so powerful it refused to let go. Dr. Harper finished cleaning and dressing Bella's wounds. Her fever is dangerously high, she said, pressing a cool cloth to Bella's forehead. We've started her on strong antibiotics, but we'll need to keep an eye on her temperature. David leaned over Bella, his hand brushing gently against her uninjured side. Her body shivered under his touch, a faint whimper escaping her lips. You're going to be okay, he whispered. You've got your babies waiting for you. They need you. Dr. Harper watched him for a moment, her expression softening. You've got a way with her, she said. Sometimes they just need to feel like they're not alone. David nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He felt a connection to Bella that he couldn't quite explain, as if saving her was somehow tied to his own healing. He had failed to save Shadow, but maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference here. The first signs of hope came as dawn broke over Maple Valley. Bella's breathing had steadied slightly, and her temperature had dropped a fraction of a degree. It wasn't much, but it was enough to spark cautious optimism among the team. David stayed awake through the night, his eyes red-rimmed but determined. He spoke softly to Bella, recounting stories about Shadow and their years together on the force. He told her about the day Shadow had saved a child lost in the woods, how his wagging tail had led them to safety. Bella's ears twitched faintly at the sound of his voice, a small but meaningful response. She's listening, Dr. Harper said with a small smile as she checked Bella's vitals. Keep talking. It seems to help. David continued, his words weaving a tapestry of memories and promises. You remind me of him, he said quietly. He never gave up no matter what, and I can see that same fight in you. By mid-morning, the puppies were brought back to Bella, one by one. Claire carried the smallest, a runt with a tiny white patch on its chest, and placed it near Bella's face. Bella stirred, her eyes fluttering open as she nuzzled the puppy weakly. It let out a squeak of recognition, burrowing into her fur. The sight brought a lump to David's throat. She's still got a long way to go, Dr. Harper said, watching the interaction, but this is a good sign. David stayed until his legs ached and his eyes burned with exhaustion. Yet he couldn't leave. Bella's fight for life had become his own battle, a chance to make amends for the guilt he carried. He knew that for Bella, for her puppies, and perhaps for himself, the fight was far from over. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light through the hospital windows, David leaned close to Bella and whispered, You've got this, girl. Just hold on a little longer.
Bella's tail gave a faint thump against the table, a fragile but unmistakable sign of life. It was a victory, however small, and David clung to it with all the hope he could muster. Together, they would face whatever came next. The days that followed were a whirlwind of challenges and quiet triumphs. Bella remained under close watch at Maple Valley Animal Hospital, her condition still fragile. Despite the medications and care, she continued to fight off the infection that had taken a toll on her body. Yet even in her weakened state, Bella's instincts as a mother remained strong. Every time the puppies were brought to her, Bella mustered strength she didn't seem to have. She nudged them gently, cleaning their tiny faces with soft licks, her eyes full of unwavering love. David Miller watched these moments with awe, his admiration for the brave German shepherd growing with each passing day. David had made it a habit to spend as much time as he could at the hospital. He'd bring a book or work on reports, but his focus was always on Bella and her puppies. The more time he spent with them, the stronger his connection to Bella grew. Her resilience reminded him of Shadow, his late canine partner, who had faced his battle with cancer with similar courage. One evening, David sat beside Bella, watching as her puppies wriggled around her. The smallest one, with a distinctive white patch on its chest, let out a squeaky bark and tumbled toward him. David reached out and scooped the pup into his hands. Its tiny tail wagged furiously as it nuzzled into his palm. Bella's eyes followed the pup, and for a moment, David thought he saw approval in her gaze. "You're incredible, Bella," he murmured. the way you fight for them. It's inspiring." Bella let out a soft sigh, her head resting on her paws, as her body relaxed for the first time that day. It was as if she understood his words and trusted him completely. News of Bella's rescue began to spread through Maple Valley. It started with a few mentions on social media, photos of Bella and her puppies shared by the vet staff. The story of a mother dog who had endured so much to protect her young resonated deeply with the community. Soon, donations began pouring into the animal hospital. Bags of dog food, blankets, and even toys for the puppies arrived daily. A local pet store organized a fundraiser, pledging a percentage of their sales to Bella's care. David was amazed by the outpouring of kindness. The hospital's waiting room, once quiet and clinical, was now filled with colorful cards and drawings from children who had been inspired by Bella's story. One drawing in particular caught his eye. A crayon sketch of Bella surrounded by her puppies under a bright sun. In the corner, a small figure labeled Officer Miller stood holding a leash. Dr. Harper held up the drawing with a smile. "Looks like you're part of the story now." David chuckled softly, but felt a pang of warmth in his chest. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about her and what she's done." One Saturday morning, David arrived at the hospital to find a small crowd gathered outside. Families, children, and even a few reporters had come to show their support for Bella and her puppies. Dr. Harper, looking slightly overwhelmed but pleased, stepped out to address them. "Thank you all for being here," she said warmly. "Bella and her puppies are still recovering, but they're fighters. Your generosity has made a huge difference." David stood off to the side, watching as the crowd murmured words of encouragement. A little girl with pigtails approached him, clutching a stuffed animal. "Is Bella okay?" she asked, her voice small but earnest. "She's doing much better," David assured her, kneeling to her level, "and she's very grateful for all the love you're sending her." The girl handed him the stuffed animal. "Can you give this to her, so she won't be lonely?" David's throat tightened as he accepted the gift. "I'll make sure she gets it," he promised. Inside the hospital, Bella's progress, though slow, was steady. Her wounds were healing, and her fever had finally broken. The puppies, growing stronger each day, were a bundle of energy, tumbling over one another in their incubator. Bella watched them with a mix of pride and exhaustion, her tail thumping softly against the table whenever one of them squeaked. David sat beside her, the stuffed animal resting near her head. "Looks like you've got a whole town rooting for you," he said, scratching gently behind her ears. Bella leaned into his touch, her eyes half closing in contentment. Dr. Harper entered the room, carrying a clipboard. "Her latest blood work looks good," she said, her tone optimistic. "She's still not out of the woods, but she's made remarkable progress." David nodded, relief washing over him. "She's incredible," he said. "She's been through so much, but she never gives up." Dr. Harper smiled. "It's not just her strength. She's fighting because she knows she's not alone anymore." As the sun set over Maple Valley, David found himself reflecting on the past few days. Bella had come into his life by chance, yet she had reignited something within him that he hadn't felt since losing Shadow. Watching her care for her puppies, despite her own pain, reminded him of the strength and resilience that love could inspire. The soft sound of Bella's breathing and the occasional squeak from the puppies filled the room. David leaned back in his chair, exhaustion pulling at him, but his heart felt lighter than it had in months. Bella's story was far from over, but for the first time the path ahead seemed brighter, not just for her, but for him too. In the quiet of the hospital, under the warm glow of hope, a bond stronger than words was forged between a man searching for purpose and a mother dog who refused to give up. Together, they had become part of a story that was inspiring a town, a story that was just beginning to unfold. The Maple Valley police station hummed with quiet activity as David Miller sat at his desk, a stack of case files in front of him. Though Bella and her puppies were recovering well, A lingering question gnawed at him. Where had Bella come from? The thin, tattered collar she had worn, devoid of tags, suggested she had once belonged to someone, but who and what had led her to that desperate state under the Riverbend Bridge? Determined to find answers, David began piecing together the clues. He reached out to the animal hospital, where Dr. Harper had examined Bella's injuries in detail. She mentioned that some of Bella's scars were consistent with prolonged confinement, perhaps in a kennel or cage. Combined with her malnourished state and recent litter, the evidence painted a grim picture. It's possible she was part of a breeding operation, Dr. Harper had suggested during one of his visits. A place that prioritized profit over the well-being of the animals. David's gut twisted at the thought. Over the years he had encountered his fair share of cruelty, but the idea of Bella enduring such a fate stirred something deeper, a sense of responsibility to ensure her suffering had not been in vain. David's investigation led him to sift through reports of illegal breeding operations in the region. Most were small-scale setups, difficult to track, and quick to relocate when authorities drew near. Still, patterns began to emerge, sightings of neglected dogs, anonymous tips about suspicious activity, and records of raids where some dogs had escaped. One report stood out. A raid conducted in a neighboring county several months earlier had targeted a notorious breeder, James Wilson. Wilson had managed to evade arrest, but the property had been left in disarray. Among the evidence collected were photos of malnourished dogs, including a German Shepherd mix that bore a striking resemblance to Bella. David leaned back in his chair, staring at the grainy photo. The dog in the image had the same soulful eyes, the same dignified posture, despite the visible signs of neglect. His jaw tightened. Bella had survived unimaginable hardship, and it was time to ensure the man responsible faced justice. Weeks of careful surveillance and coordination followed. David worked with animal welfare organizations and law enforcement from nearby counties to track Wilson's movements. Reports suggested he had relocated to an isolated property on the outskirts of Maple Valley, continuing his operation in secret. Finally, on a chilly morning just before dawn, David and his team moved in. The property was eerily quiet as they approached, the sound of their boots muffled by the frost-covered ground. David's heart pounded as he signaled for the team to split up, each group covering an assigned area of the sprawling property. The scene that greeted them was worse than David had imagined. Rows of makeshift kennels, many falling apart, housed dogs in various states of neglect. The air was thick with the stench of uncleaned enclosures and desperation. Emaciated dogs huddled in corners, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. David's attention was drawn to one kennel in particular. Inside was a German Shepherd mix, its appearance hauntingly familiar. Though not Bella, the dog's resemblance to her was uncanny. It was a stark reminder of what Bella had escaped, and what could have been her fate. The raid was swift and thorough. Wilson, caught trying to flee through the back of the property, was subdued and arrested. As officers led him away in handcuffs, David couldn't resist confronting him. "Do you even care about what you've done to these animals?" David asked, his voice low, but filled with barely restrained anger. Wilson smirked, his response dripping with indifference. "They're just dogs. Replaceable." David's fists clenched, but he forced himself to remain professional. "Not anymore," he said firmly. "You're going to answer for every one of them." With Wilson in custody, the team turned their attention to rescuing the dogs. Animal control officers and volunteers worked tirelessly to transport the animals to safety. Many of the dogs, though frightened, seemed to sense that their ordeal was over. One by one, they were loaded into vehicles bound for shelters and veterinary care. As the last of the dogs were taken from the property, David stood amid the now empty kennels. The silence was heavy, the echoes of suffering lingering in the cold air. Yet, amidst the heartbreak, there was a sense of triumph. Bella's story had led to this moment, a chance to bring light to a dark corner of the world. Later that day, David visited Bella at the animal hospital. She was resting comfortably, her puppies nestled against her side. Dr. Harper greeted him with a warm smile. "She's doing great," she said. "Whatever you've been doing, keep it up." David knelt beside Bella, stroking her soft fur. She opened her eyes and looked at him, her gaze calm and trusting. "We got him," he said softly. "You're safe now, and so are so many others." Bella's tail thumped weakly against the blanket, as if she understood. The raid became a turning point for the community. News of the operation spread quickly, with Bella's story serving as a symbol of resilience and hope. The people of Maple Valley rallied together, organizing donation drives and awareness campaigns to combat animal cruelty. For David, the experience was deeply personal. He had seen the worst of humanity, but also its best, the compassion and determination of those who fought to make a difference. Bella's journey wasn't just about her survival. It was about the lives she had inspired and the change she had sparked. As David left the hospital that evening, he glanced back at Bella and her puppies, a small smile playing on his lips. "We did it," he whispered to himself, and in his heart, he knew the fight had been worth it. Bella's past no longer defined her. She was a survivor, and her story was far from over. The warm hum of recovery filled the air at Maple Valley Animal Hospital. Bella's transformation was remarkable. Her once fragile frame had grown stronger, and the brightness in her eyes had returned. Her coat, now clean and beginning to shine, was a testament to weeks of care, love, and determination. The puppies, once frail and clinging to survival, were now a playful bundle of energy, tumbling over each other and filling the room with their squeaks and tiny barks. David Miller had been there nearly every day, watching Bella and her puppies heal. Each visit reminded him of the incredible strength of love and resilience. He'd grown especially fond of the puppies, each with their distinct personalities. Dr. Harper smiled as she approached David one morning, a clipboard in hand. "I think it's time they had names," she said, gesturing toward the playful litter. David nodded, crouching to watch them. The smallest, with the white patch on its chest, seemed to take the lead in every game, often nudging the others into action. "This one's Hope," David said with a smile. "She's the fighter, just like her mum." Another puppy, always calm and gentle, seemed to balance the chaos. "Faith," Dr. Harper suggested, noting its steady demeanor. A particularly bouncy pup earned the name Joy, while the most adventurous pair were dubbed Lucky and Spirit. The names felt perfect, each reflecting not only their personalities, but also the journey they had undertaken with Bella. "Hope, Faith, Joy, Lucky, and Spirit," David said aloud. "Sounds like a team ready to take on the world." As the weeks passed, word spread about Bella and her remarkable puppies. Applications to adopt the little ones flooded the animal hospital. Dr. Harper and her team carefully vetted each potential family, ensuring that each pup would go to a loving home. One by one, the puppies found their forever families. Faith went to a retired teacher who had recently lost her dog and was looking for a calm companion. Joy joined a lively family with 3 children who adored her boundless energy. Lucky and Spirit were adopted by neighboring families who promised regular playdates to keep the siblings close. David watched each adoption with mixed emotions. He was thrilled that the puppies would have the loving homes they deserved, but couldn't help feeling a pang of sadness as he bid each one goodbye. Only Hope remained, her adoption delayed as she recovered from a mild cold. Bella, now fully recovered, seemed content to see her puppies thrive. She watched each one leave with a mix of pride and longing, her tail wagging softly as if to say goodbye. David's bond with Bella had grown stronger with each passing day. She had become more than just a rescue. She was a source of comfort and a reminder of the healing power of love. Hope, too, had wormed her way into his heart with her determined spirit and playful antics. One evening, David sat in the quiet of the treatment room, Hope curled in his lap while Bella rested at his feet. Dr. Harper entered with a knowing smile. "You've been spending a lot of time here," she said. "Have you thought about taking them home?" David looked at Bella, who raised her head and gazed at him with those soulful eyes. Hope let out a tiny yawn, snuggling deeper into his arms. The decision had been forming in his heart for weeks, and now it felt inevitable. "I think they've already decided for me," he said, stroking Hope's soft fur. "Bella and Hope, they belong with me." The day Bella and Hope left the hospital was a sunny one, the warmth of spring finally chasing away the remnants of winter. David had spent days preparing his home, ensuring it was ready for his new companions. He set up a cozy bed for Bella in the living room and filled the yard with toys for Hope to explore. As he opened the door to his house, Bella stepped inside cautiously, her nose twitching as she took in her new surroundings. Hope, on the other hand, bounded forward with unrestrained excitement, slipping on the hardwood floors before tumbling into a pile of toys. David laughed, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. "You're home," he said, kneeling beside Bella. She nudged his hand with her nose, her tail wagging slowly. It was as if she understood the significance of the moment, a second chance for her puppy, and for David, too. Life with Bella and Hope brought a joy David hadn't realized he was missing. Bella's calm presence was a comfort, while Hope's playful energy filled the house with laughter. On quiet evenings, Bella would rest her head on David's knee, her gaze steady and trusting. Hope would curl up at his feet, her small body radiating warmth. At the police station, Bella and Hope became instant favorites. Bella's dignified demeanor earned her admiration, while Hope's mischief brought smiles to everyone she met. Even the gruffest officers couldn't resist her charm. As David watched them grow and thrive, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. Bella had taught him about resilience, and Hope had reminded him of the power of new beginnings. Together, they had turned a story of pain into one of healing and hope. The story of Bella and her puppies continued to inspire Maple Valley. People who had followed their journey came to see them, bringing treats and toys. Some even shared how Bella's story had motivated them to adopt or volunteer at local shelters. For David, the journey with Bella and Hope was far from over. It was just beginning, a life filled with love, trust, and the promise of brighter days ahead. As the sun set on another day, David sat on his porch, Bella resting beside him, and Hope sprawled across his lap. The sky was painted in hues of gold and lavender, a fitting backdrop for the life they had built together. "You've changed everything," David said softly, scratching behind Bella's ears. Her tail thumped gently in response. Hope let out a small yip, her tail wagging furiously as if to agree, and in that moment, surrounded by the quiet peace of a new beginning, David knew that the seeds of hope had truly blossomed. 4-0. The air was filled with a quiet sense of anticipation as David Miller parked his truck in the driveway of his modest home in Maple Valley. The back seat was alive with the soft rustling of Bella and the excited yips of Hope. After weeks at the animal hospital, Bella and her puppy were finally coming home. David had spent days preparing for their arrival, ensuring every detail was perfect. He had cleared a corner in the living room for Bella's new bed, a large, cushioned space where she could rest comfortably. The backyard, freshly fenced, had been scattered with toys and space for Hope to explore. "You ready, Bella?" David asked as he opened the back door. Bella stepped out cautiously, her eyes scanning the surroundings. She looked at David for reassurance, her tail wagging faintly when he scratched behind her ears. Hope, on the other hand, bounded out with unrestrained energy, slipping slightly on the driveway before bolting toward the front door. Inside, Bella took her time exploring the house. Her nose twitched as she sniffed every corner, her movements slow and deliberate. Hope, meanwhile, dashed from room to room, her tiny paws skittering across the hardwood floors. David laughed as she slid into a pile of toys he had carefully arranged in the living room. "You've got the energy of 10 dogs," he said, scooping her up. Hope wiggled in his arms, her tail wagging furiously. He set her down gently near Bella, who had settled on her new bed. Bella watched Hope's antics with a mix of patience and maternal pride, occasionally nudging her back when she strayed too far. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, David sat on the couch with a mug of coffee in hand. Bella lay at his feet, her head resting on his boots, while Hope snoozed in her bed nearby. The house felt alive in a way it hadn't since Shadow's passing. It was as though a missing piece of David's life had finally fallen into place. The next morning, David decided to introduce Bella and Hope to his colleagues at the Maple Valley police station. He loaded them into his truck, Hope peeking over the seat as Bella rested quietly beside her. At the station, Bella's calm and dignified demeanor immediately won over everyone. Officers approached cautiously at first, but Bella greeted them with a gentle wag of her tail. Her presence seemed to bring a sense of peace to the bustling environment. Hope, on the other hand, became the center of attention with her boundless energy. She darted from person to person, her tiny tail wagging like a propeller. Even the gruffest officers couldn't resist her charm. By the end of the day, the station was stocked with treats and toys for the two newcomers. "She's got better manners than some of the guys on my team," Chief Reynolds joked, watching Bella accept a treat with careful politeness. "She's a quick learner," David replied, pride evident in his voice. Life settled into a comforting rhythm. Each morning, David would take Bella and Hope on long walks through the trails near his house. Bella walked steadily beside him, her calm presence grounding, while Hope darted ahead, stopping every few steps to sniff at something new. At home, the backyard became Hope's playground. She chased after toys with unbridled enthusiasm, often tumbling over herself in her excitement. Bella watched her from the shade of a tree, occasionally joining in with a playful bark that reminded David of her renewed vitality. Evenings were spent in quiet companionship. Bella would rest beside David as he read or watched TV, her head occasionally nudging his hand for attention. Hope would curl up on his lap, her small body radiating warmth. For David, the bond he shared with Bella and Hope was transformative. Losing Shadow had left a void in his life, one he thought could never be filled. But Bella's quiet strength and Hope's playful spirit brought a new kind of joy, one rooted in resilience and the power of second chances. He often found himself reflecting on how far they had come. Bella, once a frightened and injured dog under a bridge, was now a picture of health and calm. Hope, her fearless puppy, had grown into a bundle of mischief and love. Together, they had not only healed, but had also brought healing to David. Bella and Hope's presence extended beyond David's home. At the station, they had become unofficial mascots, lifting the spirits of everyone they encountered. Bella's calm demeanor was particularly comforting during stressful days, while Hope's antics never failed to bring laughter. The people of Maple Valley continued to follow their story. Neighbors would often stop by to drop off treats or ask for updates. Children who had drawn pictures for Bella at the hospital now came to visit her, delighting in the sight of her wagging tail and Hope's boundless energy. One quiet evening, David sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle above. Bella lay beside him, her head resting on his knee, while Hope sprawled across his feet, snoring softly. The gentle breeze carried the faint scent of pine and earth, a reminder of the trails they had walked earlier that day. "You've brought something back into my life I thought I'd lost," David said softly, his hand resting on Bella's head. Her tail thumped once against the porch, as if to say she understood. Looking down at Hope, who twitched in her sleep, David smiled. "You're both my family now." In that moment, under the vast expanse of the night sky, David realized that his home wasn't just a house anymore. It was a place filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of a second chance, a place where hope had truly blossomed. The soft hum of voices and laughter filled the crisp autumn air as the residents of Maple Valley gathered at the town square for the inaugural Pet Adoption and Rescue Festival. Inspired by Bella's story, the event had grown from a simple idea into a celebration of second chances and the enduring bond between people and animals. Colourful banners fluttered in the breeze, each emblazoned with phrases like "Every life matters" and "Adopt, don't shop." Booths lined the square, offering everything from pet adoption opportunities to educational talks about animal welfare. Children ran about with painted faces, some sporting whiskers or paw prints, while volunteers walked rescue dogs, hoping to match them with loving homes. At the center of it all stood Bella and Hope, the event's unofficial mascots. Bella had recovered fully, her coat gleaming in the soft sunlight. She stood with quiet dignity, her calm eyes observing the bustling scene around her. Hope, now a lively young dog, darted between visitors, her boundless energy and wagging tail drawing smiles from everyone she encountered. "She's like a little ambassador," Dr. Harper remarked to David, gesturing to Hope as she nudged a hesitant child into petting her. "And Bella, she's become the heart of this community." David couldn't help but smile. "She's certainly changed mine." The festival wasn't just about adoption. It was a rallying cry for compassion and change. Local businesses had donated generously, with proceeds from sales going directly to support animal shelters in the area. Volunteers hosted workshops on recognizing signs of animal abuse and the importance of adopting from reputable sources. Near the main stage, a table overflowed with handmade cards and letters from children, many of whom had followed Bella's journey since the day she was rescued. One note, scrawled in colorful crayon, read, "Thank you, Bella, for being so brave. You're my hero." David gently placed his hand on Bella's head as she leaned against him, her tail wagging softly. "You've touched more lives than you'll ever know," he whispered. As the day progressed, several dogs found their forever homes, their wagging tails a testament to the kindness of strangers willing to give them a second chance. Families left with adoption certificates, smiling as they carried their new companions into the next chapter of their lives. On stage, Chief Reynolds addressed the crowd, his tone both heartfelt and inspiring. Bella's story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope. Her courage has sparked something in all of us, a commitment to do better, to care more, and to make sure no animal suffers in silence. The audience erupted in applause as Bella and Hope were invited onto the stage. David led them up, his heart swelling with pride. Bella stood tall, her presence commanding yet gentle, while Hope bounced around, eliciting laughter from the crowd. "Bella and Hope are more than survivors," Chief Reynolds continued. "They're symbols of resilience, love, and the power of community." The festival concluded with a candlelight vigil for animals still in need. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the square was illuminated by hundreds of flickering candles. David stood with Bella on one side and Hope on the other, the warmth of their presence grounding him in the moment. The event raised more than donations, it ignited a movement. Inspired by Bella's story, Maple Valley residents pledged to continue supporting shelters, fostering animals, and advocating for stronger animal protection laws. The festival was declared an annual event, ensuring that Bella's legacy would endure. Later that night, David returned home with Bella and Hope. The house was quiet, the stars above casting a soft glow through the windows. Bella settled onto her bed with a contented sigh, while Hope curled up beside David on the couch, her small body radiating warmth. As David stroked Hope's fur, his thoughts drifted to the journey that had brought them here. From a desperate cry beneath a bridge to the joy and hope that now filled their lives, Bella's story had become a testament to the transformative power of love and second chances. "You've changed so much more than you know," he said softly, glancing at Bella. She met his gaze, her eyes calm and trusting. "You've given this town and me a reason to believe in miracles." In the weeks that followed, Bella and Hope continued to inspire. Bella became a certified therapy dog, visiting schools and nursing homes, while Hope's playful antics made her a favorite at the police station. Their story was featured in local newspapers and even a regional news broadcast, spreading their message far beyond Maple Valley. As life settled into its new rhythm, David often found himself marveling at how much had changed. Bella and Hope were more than companions. They were family. Together, they had turned pain into purpose, despair into joy, and an uncertain future into a story of hope. On quiet evenings, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the stars, David would feel a profound sense of gratitude. Bella's legacy wasn't just about the lives she had saved. It was about the love she had brought into the world, a love that would ripple outward for years to come.